So welcome back, everybody, and I hope everyone had the opportunity to enjoy one of those two showcase sessions that we've just had. Really interesting sessions, and a reminder, if you want to catch up on the one that you weren't able to watch, then recordings of both of those sessions are available, and there'll be a link sent out to those to you immediately following the conclusion of the event today. So this morning, the session that we heard focused on the high frequencies, the millimeter range frequencies, and now we're moving down the spectrum a little bit to focus on the mid-band spectrum. So once again, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers here. I think all of the speakers in this session are going to be speaking in English. So a reminder to everybody, if you do need translation into Russian, then that is available via the app. So you can see at the bottom of your screen all of the details to access that app. And another reminder as well, we do have plenty of time at the end of the session for a discussion and for Q&A. So please do post your questions in the chat. You can post those either in Russian or in English. Post those in the chat, and we will be bringing those across and putting those to the speakers, and they will be addressed during the discussion part of the session. So without further ado, I would like to now pass over to our moderator for the session, Kirill Minchev from Ether Consulting. Kirill, welcome. Great to have you with us, and yeah, we're really looking forward to the session. So I'll pass over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dan. It is a great honor to be here at this Spectrum Management Conference. Good afternoon, everyone, and indeed good morning or good evening, depending on your time zone. And welcome everyone to session 5 of this conference. As Dan mentioned, the title of this session is Finding the Required Mid-Band Spectrum. Just a very brief introduction on my side. My name is Kirill Minchev, and I'm a manager at Ether Consulting. We are a specialist telecom and spectrum strategy consultancy. We're based in the United Kingdom. I'm pleased and honored to have the opportunity to moderate the session. I think so far we had some very exciting sessions, and I hope that this session will also be of interest to you. The structure of the session will be as follows. We will start with introductory presentations from each of our panelists, and after that we'll move to a Q&A discussion. As Dan mentioned, we will have kind of 25 minutes for a Q&A after that. However, before I give the floor to our panelists, I'll try to set the scene very briefly. So as the title suggests, today we're going to focus on the mid-band spectrum in the CIS region. I think the main focus, as usual, will be the C-band, but I'm sure we'll also discuss bands such as the 4.8 to 4.99 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 2.6 gigahertz, and the 2.3 gigahertz. The C-band is widely seen today as the pioneer 5G band around the world. However, in some part of the CIS region, in Russia, for example, this spectrum is not currently available for mobile, mainly due to its use for incumbent services. In the mobile industry, this spectrum is widely viewed today as offering the optimal balance of coverage and capacity. However, in the same time, this spectrum is also very crucial for incumbent users in the region. Many countries have cleared or are in the process of clearing parts of this band. For example, in Europe, the 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz has been assigned in a number of countries. Obviously, the situation in the CS region is different, and it will be very interesting to hear our panelists, what do they think is the best way forward. Is the solution to clear some of the C-band for mobile? And if so, how much bandwidth could be potentially made available to meet the demand? Alternatively, could other bands be options for mobile across the region? For example, Russia has turned to the 4.8 to 4.99 gigahertz as a potential alternative. But the question is, what are the challenges and complications when it comes to using this band in comparison to the more widely harmonized 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz? The next interesting topic we hope we'll have the opportunity to discuss is, and I think this is very relevant to the whole discussion, is how much spectrum do we actually need for 5G? On the one hand, the ITU, the European Commission, and a number of panelists earlier suggested that we need large contiguous blocks of spectrum, preferably 80 to 100 megahertz per MNO. On the other hand, it is technically possible to deploy 5G using 40 to 60 megahertz of spectrum, and we've seen examples around the world of just that. So the question is, what is the right balance? How much spectrum can we find, and in which band, so that we meet the needs of the mobile industry while still meet the requirements of incumbent users in the band? I hope all these questions will be addressed by our panelists. With that in mind, now let me quickly introduce our panelists. I'm thrilled to say that we have an outstanding panel of experts with us today. To get started, we have met Pavšek Tasko from ACOS, the Slovenian regulator, Then we have Bakhtiar Mahamov from MITC in the Republic of Uzbekistan. After that, we'll continue with Hazem Moakit from ESOA. Then we have Ilya Kruchkov from Ericsson. And finally, we have Luciana Camargos from GSMA. Meanwhile, just a reminder, our audience have the opportunity to ask questions using the chat function to the right of your screen. I'm sure there will be exciting questions coming and the panelists will be happy to discuss. So without further ado, to get started, we have Meta from ACOS. Hello, Meta. I would like to invite Meta to give her presentation. Over to you, Meta.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meta Pavšek-Taškov. I'm head of mobile service at ACOS, Slovenian regulator. Today, I will present you finding required mid-band spectrum in Slovenian vision. Next slide, please. So there is a need for more spectrum in mid-bands, enabling large bandwidths for higher throughputs and other use for mobile operators in the next 5 to 7 years. How much spectrum, if any, could be realistically made available for IMT in C-bands across 50 countries? I hope my presentation will help to answer to this question. But starting with how much spectrum is required in which time frame and why. So in Slovenia, the COVID crisis has proven the robustness of MNO networks, but there was a huge increase of traffic, in average as much as 30%, but in some regions in peak hours, even up to 200%. Operators were optimizing their network capacity to keep up with the traffic spikes, but nevertheless, they all reported lack of spectrum. And for the short term, for first 5G deployment, they believe around 100 megahertz of contiguous spectrum per MNO would be required. But in the future, in next 5 to 7 years, it could be between 200 and 400. And operators and the verticals in Slovenian public consultation on draft strategy topic express the vertical express the needs of part of 2.3 and 3.6 gigahertz band to be used for them, and perhaps spectrum in 3.8 to 4.2 megahertz band. But the mobile operators preferred more spectrum in mid and lower band, especially the band which would be worldwide harmonized or regionally harmonized. And the growth of demand will be driven by new applications such as HD, UHD, augmented virtual reality, the evolution of new devices, for example, thinner augmented reality, virtual reality glasses, foldable screens, fabric pop-ups, and so on. COVID crisis as well accelerating investment in e-healthcare, smart home, smart city, smart manufacturing. There is a big need in very remote areas for fixed wireless access. And in the crisis, the popularization of unlimited data tariff plans get higher. Next slide, please. Slovenia has already rolled out 5G into the 6 gigahertz band. This rollout was made by one operator just recently, and it has got kind of 60 to 70% of population coverage. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Excuse me, can you go one slide back, please? Yes. So with regards to the band question, 4.4 to 5 gigahertz, 2.3 or 2.6 could it be option across CPT? Unfortunately, the bands 4.4 to 5 GHz are not available in Slovenia, but for all the other bands, we could say yes. So the 2.6 has already been harmonized and assigned in majority of CPT countries. And the primary 5G bands such as 700, 3.4, and 26 are in assignments in majority of CPT countries. It will be as well in Slovenia in the beginning of 2021. But beside these bands, Slovenia will auction as well 2.1 GHz band, 2.3, and 3.4 to 3.8. And for verticals, we have left some parts of these two bands for their needs. Next slide, please. How can we ensure that requirements of satellite and incumbent users of mid-spectrum band are fully taken care of? So we believe that with license use, fixed service coordination will be facilitated. With regards to coexistence with fixed satellite service, we believe that studies from WRC 15 period should be reviewed with new facts. These are new technical features of IMT 2020 systems and new developed recommendations. So active antenna system beamforming implementing over massive MIMO antennas and could reduce aggregated power density influence in comparison to 4G, which had larger radiation angle and uses constant power. There were as well some new recommendations developed since that time. This is Earth to space clutter loss recommendation, Earth to space propagation model, and building entry loss recommendation. The work is going on in ITU and 3GPP on these 6 GHz band studies, and IMT and incumbent parameters and models are under development. Next slide, please. Slovenia vision for 6 GHz band in usage in Europe. So the lower part of 6 GHz band has just been harmonized for the Wi-Fi. And with RTRC in the decision, this and the studies in the reports, the compatibility with incumbent services is to be achieved. But for upper frequency band, there is more fixed service usage in the CPT countries. Therefore, we believe that licensed regime would be better. Coordination with fixed services will be achieved through this. For long hops, for backhauling will be probably easier because this backhauling is set over on high mountains and in rural areas, and the 5G deployment in 6 GHz band is mostly expected in the urban areas. Why this upper 6 GHz band is as well important? We can see that the 3GPP band 78 falls in the uplink of satellites which have downlink in the 3.7. This is in the primary 5G band in the majority of CPT countries. Therefore, the deployment is comparable and protection can be achieved in similar way. Next slide, please. So to conclude, how important is it that coordinated approach to mid-band allocation is taken both across the region and also with the neighboring countries? Slovenia believes that it is very important to achieve economy of scale. Therefore, global harmonization is the best approach. We believe it's not so crucial that all neighboring countries adopt IMT. It is important that is harmonized across regions, or at least region, so that we have affordable equipment on the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Meta. That was a very good overview of the Slovenian situation. You mentioned that in your view, the mobile industry needs 100 megahertz per MNO for 5G in the C-band in the short term, and 200 to 400 megahertz per MNO in the long term. It will be very interesting to hear how this view compares to that with the other panelists. Thank you also very much for your overview of the Slovenian multi-band auction that's coming up. I think that would be a very good case study for all of us to see the price of the mid-band in comparison to the low and high frequency band. I don't think there was any other European auction up to date where the 700 3.4 to 3.8 and the 26 gigahertz were auctioned simultaneously. Actually, I think Italy is one example, but that was an auction where the 3.5 was packaged in a way that possibly inflated the price a little bit. So thank you very much indeed, Meta. Our next speaker is Bakhtior Makhamov. He is from the Ministry for Development of Information Technologies and Communications in the Republic of Uzbekistan. Hello, Bakhtior. The floor is all yours.
Hello. Good afternoon, dear friends. It's better to say dear colleagues, good day. First of all, it's an honor for me to speak such distinguished audience as you. I'm very proud to stand with the outstanding colleagues, and let me start my presentation about radio frequency spectrum requirements of Uzbekistan for IMT systems in the mid-band spectrum. So please, next slide. Dear friends, this is current state of spectrum allocation for IMT systems in Uzbekistan. And before we will speak about C-band, I would like to give you a little bit history. I'm very proud to say that we are one of the first countries in Central Asia who could make allocation for 700 megahertz. If you can see by this slide, the frequency range 700 megahertz. We're using it for LTE, 5G, NB-IoT, and the amount of spectrum used 80 megahertz. And we also reserve it for mobile operators 20 megahertz. And the next one is the same, like 700 megahertz we using for LTE and for another IMT options like CDMA, VCDMA, and so on. And I think that the most important, one of the most important for operators is like we're also one of the first countries in Central Asia who could deploy the 900, 1800, and 1900 and 2100 megahertz with the technical neutrality. So it means that the operator can develop its systems in any options of IMT, including 2G or 3G or 4G, as they want. So this is technical neutrality, and the amount of spectrum used total is more than 300 megahertz. So as you can see, the next one is the 2300 megahertz. We also use for LTE, and we also reserve it more than 80 megahertz for that, and 2600 megahertz also for LTE, and so on. And C-band, we already deployed and allocated for operators, and the amount of spectrum used is 300 megahertz. So the next slide, we will see more detail about how we made it. So available spectrum for IMT systems in the C-band in Uzbekistan. Dear friends, as you can see, based on the results of the work carried out on the redistribution and conversion of the C-band in 2018-2020, we could make allocate 306 megahertz was freed, and the band, as you can see, starting from 3400 till 4000 megahertz band. So nowadays, it's 600 megahertz become available for the implementation of IMT systems. Now, currently, we have 5 mobile operators in Uzbekistan, and I can say that 3 of them already have license. And to date, 300 megahertz has been allocated to 3 mobile operators, and they have this. Each of them have 100 megahertz on TDD technology, and they already testing it for 5G. And I hope that very recently we'll proclaim about the using 5G in commercial version. So, dear friends, still 300 megahertz remains available for IMT systems in the C-band in Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, the C-band is rarely used for fixed satellite services, including the distribution of digital television, and therefore the release and the allocation of this part of the spectrum has become available. And for us, a positive decision on primary allocation of the band 3600, 3800 megahertz to the mobile service in region 1, according to item 1.3 of the VRC23 agenda, is a priority for the administration of Uzbekistan. And next slide, please. Here, this is just our opinion, our idea, how also we can develop and how also we can allocate our which frequency we're also considering in future if there will be some shortage for operators developing IMT systems. So here, possible use of spectrum in the mid-band spectrum range to meet future requirements of IMT systems. So our country also considering a frequency range 2,300 megahertz. As you can see, use options is 100 megahertz amount of spectrum, and 2,600 megahertz and amount of spectrum is 190 megahertz. And that remark is about that early implementation of IMT systems at the regional or global level in order to increase the interest of telecommunication equipment manufacturers and increase subscribers terminals. And we're also considering 4.8 gigahertz with amount of spectrum 190. And of course, if the global support, we also will be very happy with this. And we're also considering 6 gigahertz for IMT in future. Of course, with the adequate protection of the scientific services in the band 10,025 till 7,125 megahertz. And with the regional and global support for 4.8 gigahertz and the 6 gigahertz issue under VRC23 agenda item 1.2, it will be a big push for the fastest implementation of IMT systems. In addition to those already used in the 2.3 gigahertz, 2.6 gigahertz, and C-band, with the regional or global allocation for the deployment of IMT systems, the amount of radio frequency spectrum in mid-band, we think that will be increased by more than 1,000 megahertz. So I'll try my best to consider the time limit and tried my best to do my presentation very fast. So this was a brief information about how we use C-band. And again, I would like to note that we already allocated, Uzbekistan already allocated 3.5 till 3.8 gigahertz for the developing 5G technologies, and 3 operators already have license for developing these systems in Uzbekistan. Also, there is also 2 operators who want to get these frequencies. So that's why we reserve it. And total amount of frequencies which we reserved and which we also allocated together will be more than 600 megahertz. Dear friends, I hope that this information was useful and I was not so boring. And thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to say great thanks to organizers and participants for this wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bakhtir, for this overview of the situation in Uzbekistan. It was interesting to see that actually in Uzbekistan, the C-band is indeed available for mobile. And thank you for your overview of some of the other key mid-bands that you talked about, the 2.3, 2.6, the 4.8, and the 6 gigahertz. That was very interesting for you, Bakhtir. Thank you very much. So let's keep things moving. So far, we had the pleasure to hear from 2 regulators from Slovenia and Uzbekistan. Now it is turn to hear the satellite perspective on this important matter. Our next speaker is Hazem Moakit from EZO. Hello, Hazem.
Hello.
And the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Kirill. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here on this esteemed panel, and I would like to talk to you today about the point of view of the satellite industry with respect to C-band. My name is Hazem Mouakit. I'm representing ISOA, but I am come from Intelsat, where I've been working there for several years. So next slide, please. So needless to say that the satellite industry has been operating in C-band for close to 50 years, over 50 years right now. So the situation around the world is different. It varies by region. So this chart shows you kind of the difference in how the C-band spectrum is used around the world, and you can see that there's variations around it. So this is kind of the starting point, that there is there's no one size fits all in this situation. The situation varies by region and by country. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So the use of C-band around the world varies, like I said before, and this is reflected in the allocation. So for example, you look at certain parts of the world where there is heavy usage of C-band in FSS in a B2B or B2C situations. For example, you look at countries in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia, country of over 200 and 250 million people. They rely on C-band for TV distribution to consumers. And if you take a trip to Jakarta and you look through your hotel window, you'll see the number of C-band dishes that are all looking at satellites to receive TV. A similar situation in Brazil, for example, to a certain degree, similar situation in Africa. However, when you look at the situation in the US, Canada, the reliance on C-band is primarily for B2B. It is used for media distribution, but the receivers are primarily businesses, cable companies or broadcasters. So it's a different environment. In Europe, the reliance on C-band is much less for satellite. So the point here that I'm trying to make is that you can't have one size fits all. Every region is peculiar. So you try to harmonize to the extent possible, but you have to take into account the differences in regions, in how the spectrum is being used before you sort of make a decision. I mean, for example, aviations. If you can't fly a plane in Africa without relying on a C-band link, to connect the air traffic controllers. So that has to be factored in when you look at how you use C-band. If you can go on to the next slide, please. So just to give you a global view of C-band. I mean, I come from Intelsat, like I said before. We operate over 50 satellites, most of which have C-band on them. So we have the largest C-band fleet around the world. So, but when you look at the CIS region in particular, so in Russia alone, 51 million, the estimated number of C-band TV households in Russia that rely on C-band. There's 169 geostationary satellites that operate in C-band. There's hundreds of thousands of ATMs that rely on C-band across the region. And then there's hundreds of millions of C-band TV receive-onlys worldwide. So this sort of gives you a snapshot of the vibrance of the FSS industry and the FSS ecosystem in this band. So we can't just simply brush it aside and move it and move forward. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So and then now to this question that comes up about how much spectrum is really needed for 5G and in the mid-band spectrum, and the story that we hear over and over from the mobile side is that in order to really achieve the optimum use of mid-band spectrum, each MNO needs 80 to 100 megahertz. Okay, so the reality is that this would be an ideal situation, not necessarily that it's needed or that is absolutely necessary. I mean, it's sort of like ideally, every one of us would like to be super wealthy, but that's not the reality. Same thing here with spectrum. Is 100 megahertz really necessary? No, and this has been proven in a study published by Ofcom, where they say that the majority of the economic benefits that consumers would enjoy are realized in the first 40 megahertz of spectrum. So essentially, you can achieve the benefits of 5G mid-band spectrum with as little as 40 megahertz. Of course, we understand, the more spectrum, the better. But to say that 80 to 100 megahertz is a must-have, that is misleading, we believe, on the part of the mobile industry. The other point is that ITU studies indicate that you can aggregate across multiple bands to achieve the desired performance. So you don't need to have everything in a contiguous chunk. Again, ideally, yes, you would want to have everything in contiguous chunks of spectrum, but it does not mean that this is a must, that you must have it that way, otherwise it will not work. That is not true. So, and then if we can go on to the next slide, please, we can see. So you can see around the world, for example, Telstra launched 5G with 60 megahertz. You look in the US, the amount of C-band spectrum that will be cleared for mobile is 280 megahertz, right? And that's distributed among 3 major MNOs. So, and then a lot of regional MNOs. So the point is that if you have a situation where on average, every country has about 3 MNOs, 3 major MNOs or 4 major MNOs, making available 250 to 300 megahertz of mid-band spectrum is more than sufficient to achieve this, to achieve the benefits of 5G. So essentially, if we just give more and more spectrum prematurely, that's not necessarily a good thing, because what you have to factor in that the amount of densification that is needed by the mobile operators to take advantage of the spectrum in C-band is 3 to 10 times. So there is a massive need for densification if they are to really provide border coverage. And then therefore, so I think they're going to be busy with deploying with whatever spectrum that they have, and giving them more spectrum is really inefficient. Next slide, please. And then there's the issue of coexistence between 5G and between mobile and the satellite industry, between the satellite services, FSS. So time and again, ITU studies have shown that that the compatibility in a co-frequency, co-geography between 5G and FSS is really not possible. And the simple reason for this is that the difference in signal levels and power levels between a satellite signal that is transmitted from a satellite 36,000 kilometers away against a terrestrial signal transmitted from 1 kilometer away is so huge that the satellite receivers simply cannot cope with this huge difference. In fact, even when 5G is deployed as an adjacent service, if you put 5G next to FSS as 2 adjacent services in spectrum, in adjacent pieces of spectrum, even that has to be managed carefully, and that's because you have guard band issues, you have saturation issues that you have to deal with. And in fact, what I can say as Intelsat, we dealt with this and we tested this in real life in the U.S. clearing process. So we have first knowledge about this compatibility issues. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, so I think 5G is definitely great. It should be enabled, but regulators should balance the reality and may I say fiction about 5G. So you need to look at what your own situation, how you are using the spectrum, and the best way to move forward. So the one thing that also needs to be recognized that C-band FSS satellites continue to provide critical services around the world to enable socioeconomic growth. And the third point that we need to really look at is that if you look at the connectivity problem in many countries, throwing more spectrum at mobile operators is not going to solve the connectivity problem. That's in fact that would lead to an efficient use of spectrum. If you have a situation, like I said before, if you have a situation where you have three major MNOs in your country, and even if you go with the GSMA or the mobile industry recommendation of 80 to 100 megahertz per operator, where there you have it, 300 megahertz. Each one of them gets 100 megahertz, and then it'll work. So giving more and more spectrum does not solve the connectivity problem, because often it's the problem with connectivity. It's about affordability and about coverage, and less about the amount of spectrum that is being made available. So with that, I would conclude my presentation, and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Klaas. It was very insightful to hear the satellite perspective on this important matter. Thank you for highlighting the importance of C-band for incumbent in the region. And I agree with you, one size doesn't fit all. And as expected, your views were quite different from that to the other panel in terms of how much spectrum do you need for 5G. You're suggesting 40 megahertz per MNO, and as we saw the other.
As a minimum. I mean, we're not saying 40 megahertz, but what we're saying, 100 megahertz is great if you can get it, but it doesn't mean that if you get 40 or 50 or 60, that's not gonna work.
Thank you very much, Hans. That was very interesting. Our next speaker is Ilya Krychkov from Ericsson. Hello, Ilya. I'd like to give your opening presentation. The floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot. A lot of interesting discussions indeed. So I would like, first of all, introduce myself. My name is Ilya Krychkov. I work in regional radio portfolio management for Europe and Latin America. And today I would like to share with you some of the Ericsson view on possible spectrum evolution approach in Russia and the CIS region as a whole. So if we go for the next slide and start with looking into the status of 5G market after the first 19 months of real commercial operation, we see that actually the industry has reached a certain level of maturity already. And we can leverage on number of important insights to actually plan the next steps in the 5G developments in this region as well. One of the things that I would like to emphasize here is that we see the growing maturity and let's say capabilities on 5G device ecosystem. In terms of the mid-band frequency support, we see that more and more different frequency variants are being adopted. Not only C-band, which we know as one of the main, let's say, frequency layers, but also other variants like 4.8 gigahertz, 2.3, 2.6, etc., etc. So we now have more, let's say, capable ecosystem to leverage. And Ericsson, of course, is very proud to be a part of this journey with the 5G from the very start, from the very beginning. We were pioneers in commercializing very important enablers like standalone architectures, dynamic spectrum sharing in different, very diverse markets like China, United States, Australia, Europe. So, and of course, we are more than happy to bring these insights and help the regional community with the certain recommendations. And if we go for the next slide, let's recap on the real goals of the 5G actually. So talking about the frequency needs, and we see that mid-band is really at the core of realizing the full potential of 5G networks, which are supposed to serve a variety of needs from any industries. And even when we are starting with the mobile broadband and fixed wireless access, we see ever increasing need for additional spectrum resources And I really encourage you to visit our showcase that we were showing in during the conference, where we discussed it a little bit in more details. But if we look one step ahead, we would see that for unleashing the full potential of the 5G with the new services requiring the different SLAs, latencies, throughputs, and of course coverage, which would be critically important for this region with the huge territories, we need to rely on target network architecture, which is a standalone. And here we also see that existing lower bands can help a lot while allocating the new mid-band spectrum to boost the coverage and capacity, and also control the spendings and expenditures in the 5G network deployment, which is also one of the key concerns of the operators around the globe. So on the next slide, just an illustration how it could work. So spectrum or carrier aggregation between the lower bands and new mid bands can make a huge difference in a sense how much coverage we can provide, and ultimately what would be the capacity. And here is the example for 4.8 and 79 frequency band allocation, if this scenario will happen, and like as a, again example, underlying layer of 1800 megahertz. You can see that it will make a difference, and I would say it will be a huge difference. So it would be important to keep it in mind while preparing and making decisions on the spectrum strategy, both for policymakers and operators as well. So, and we also believe that following this approach would be important as a door opener for target 5G standalone architecture, which can provide and deliver on the full promise of the 5G, of course. And if we go for the next slide, then this is how we see the technological roadmap and market readiness roadmap for different enablers of the 5G. Here, in terms of the frequency spectrum support, both on device ecosystem and infrastructure ecosystem, as well as this important functional block, which we call carrier aggregation, and where we see a lot of potential to help customers in Russia and CIS countries to facilitate the 5G developments. And here I actually would like to call for action and encourage our audience to more actively participate in 3GPP and other communities in order to ensure that all the needed frequency combinations with the new potential frequency bands like N79, N40, N7, and 48, etc., will be smoothly integrated into the existing frequencies that you have on the market, like N7, N1, and 3, and 20, etc. So, I mean, it's really important to be in this discussion and to help 3GPP and ultimately the whole ecosystem to understand what are the combination that would be needed on this market. I think this is the only way forward in order to secure the right way to introduce the real 5G on the market. And while, of course, it doesn't mean that the work on C-band side should be stopped. Of course not. But we see that it's going to be a challenge due to all the different reasons. And we hope that leveraging the other frequency options could help to shorten the time to market and bridge this gap. So if we go for the next slide and look like 2 steps maybe ahead of us, we see that the demand for new mid-band spectrum will only grow in coming years, in 5 to 10 years. So it will be inevitable to start working on preparing the new assets of the spectrum. And this is where we see 6 gigahertz as very promising option. And I would like to also encourage the local industry players and stakeholders to join our growing 6 GHz alliance, where Ericsson is one of the participants, and to start preparing for a world frequency conference, WRC23, where we hope to secure this new mid-band spectrum as an IMT and with the possibility to use it for future 5G developments. So that is the end of my presentation, and I would like to hand over the word to you, Kirill.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Ilya. That was a very good summary from you. And I agree with you that more contiguous mid-band spectrum is required in the longer term. So to keep things moving, our final speaker is Luciana Camargos from GSMA. It will be very interesting to hear GSMA's perspective on this. Hello, Luciana, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Kirill. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to thank Forum Global for the opportunity to come and speak here today, as well as organizing yet another great CIS conference. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Luciana Camargos. I'm not Daniel Georgiev. You noticed that there has been a change in the program. If you saw me yesterday at the WRC session or at the showcase session, I'm sorry, it's me again, but I hope I can make Daniel proud today. So I work for the GSMA dealing with future spectrum globally. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a global association that represents more than 750 mobile operators around the world and almost 400 companies that are part of the wider mobile ecosystem. When I look at the global spectrum picture for 5G, a couple of things stand out. The first one is that mid-band spectrum, and in particular the 3.5 gigahertz range, is essential for 5G. To use an analogy, those frequencies are what the UHF band was for 4G. I say that not because you cannot be creative and find alternatives, but the results will be nowhere near as the same as if you have them available. The second is that enormous efforts are made in most regions to provide mobile industry with at least some access to that band. As a matter of fact, the 5G leaders globally are competing on who will provide the highest amount at the best price and under the best conditions, because there is an inherent understanding among them that innovation as well as socioeconomic growth and development for these countries require the best in-class connectivity and network. And to have those, it's essential to have the right spectrum policies in place. After all, there is no mobility connectivity without spectrum. In this respect, the CIS region has some challenges. There are incumbents in the band, making it difficult to fully clear the band. Just because there are users, that does not mean that efforts should not be made to have a thorough assessment of those frequencies and efforts made to repack and use the spectrum more efficiently, or that innovative solutions cannot be found. The mobile industry throughout the region is ready to do its part and make 5G a reality, but it cannot do that unless it has access to the raw resources that make that possible. In this respect, there are some great examples. For example, there's military equipment in China making use of the band, quite limited, but the Chinese found a way to release 200 megahertz for 2 operators, so 100 megahertz each, and to compensate the third for the lack of frequencies, provided them with 160 megahertz in the 2.6 gigahertz band instead. And that is in addition to another 90 megahertz divided among the 3 in the 2.3 gigahertz band. What is imperative for this region to do is, at the very least, start having discussions with the industry on what the situation is, how much can be freed, and how to repack or move incumbents. Again, this is not an easy exercise, but it's absolutely necessary because small bits and pieces of spectrum, other bands can be an alternative. They will not be able to replace the C-band, which is still a core 5G band across the world. We can show you statistics, estimates, and numbers of the cost and benefits. We did that in our showcase session yesterday, and our slides are available. But the point I want to make here is that not having the right frequencies, the right amount, at the right time, under the right conditions, and for the right price, will mean that some countries will be in the Stone Age compared to those who do all those things. At the beginning, I made a point about alternatives, and there are some across the region. We hear about 4H, 499, 2.3 gigahertz, 2.6 gigahertz, and others. Let me be clear, those are valuable frequencies, and they will be absolutely used for 5G in the future. For example, 2.3, 2.6 gigahertz. The others, like 4.8, 4.99, and the 6 gigahertz, will be complementary and will be in addition to the 3.5 gigahertz range. As a matter of fact, Coleago will shortly publish a report looking at spectrum needs of the mobile industry for 5G in Europe. They calculate that to be in the 1 to 6 gigahertz range. The conclusions are that the industry will need 1 to 2 gigahertz of additional mid-band spectrum if the mobile operators are to achieve the quality of services for 5G in densely populated cities, as well as for rural fixed wireless access. It is for that reason that alternatives like the 6 gigahertz, the 4H, 499, and others will be complementary and used in addition to the 3.5 gigahertz range, which will be part of the first 5G wave. Simply put, there will be a need for all of them if operators are to achieve the gigabit speeds that the new technology can deliver to consumer and business. Much more spectrum in the mid-band will be needed. For us at the GSMA, this is a fact. We have been discussing that for so many years. The 3.5 gigahertz range, we started discussing that in 2005, I think. And we have said over and over that the need is there. And initially, countries were very reluctant to see the need. And we see overall that there is an increase in plans and increase in countries actually making these frequencies available. We saw in the presentation earlier today from Ezoa that the questioning, the need for 8 to 100 megahertz, saying that you can do it less. Any spectrum is welcome, and any spectrum will be used by the mobile operators. The question we have here is how best to use the resource, how best to make use of the technology. We presented yesterday numbers that show that if you have less spectrum, there will be a huge densification of the networks. If you densify the networks, that means the networks are more expensive. And it's really interesting for us to discuss that with the governments and discuss that with regulators all around the world to make sure that all these issues, all these potential issues, all these the opportunities are thoroughly discussed to make sure that we have, at the end of the day, the best possible network for the consumers, for the citizens, for the Internet of Things as well. So I'll wrap up here, and I would like to thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Luciana, for your presentation. Thank you very much for stepping in the last moment. And as you said, I'm sure Daniel will be proud of you. It's very interesting to hear your view about the challenges in the regions when it comes to mid-band spectrum. I hope we have the opportunity to touch base on this again during our discussion. So let's now move to Q&A session. Audio interference yet. Thank you very much. I think so. We have 20 minutes left for the Q&A session. So to start with the first question, that's a question for you from YouTube. What other options exist in the CIS region for mid-band for 5G? Is C-band really important as it is in the other regions? So let's possibly start in a circle. I guess maybe Luciana, you can start, given that we're already just talking about that.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, for us, for the GSMA, the C-band is very important in the CIS region. We think that we treat the 3.5 gigahertz range as the launch band of 5G. And the other bands will be important as well, and we'll see them coming through, but there is a time delay. And if the region is to have 5G today or in the near future, the 3.5 gigahertz range is key. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Meta, you're next.
Okay, yes, I think that having 3.5 gigahertz band, it will contribute to economy of scale. And if there is economy of scale, of course, you have much cheaper equipment. And as well, it is problem if you have fragmented spectrum, because then you need your... When you're doing carrier aggregation, you lose some capacity because you need more signalization and you lose some resource blocks. So to make available large contiguous blocks is very efficient. You can as well protect the earth stations by using exclusion zones and so on, and you would probably start using your IMT in the cities where you possibly don't have so many earth stations, but this is situation in Slovenia. It may be different in your region, but definitely I see great benefit of harmonizing the C-band. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has, what is your opinion on this question?
I think it goes back to you know, the one size doesn't fit all. So you look at Russia, for example. They use the entire 3.4 to 4.2 gigahertz band for satellites, and they have government programs in this band. So in this situation, perhaps they want to look at the upper 6 gigahertz band, the above 6.425. But on a harmonized level, I think the lower part of C-band, the 3.4 to 3.6, you know, or in some countries 3.4 to 3.7, that may be the place where they have to look at.
Okay, thank you. Bakhtiar, would you like to add anything to this?
Well, yeah, thank you. We also think that's very important. That's why, as I showed in my presentation, we already allocated 3.4 till 3.8 gigahertz for 5G, and our government gave this license absolutely freely, exactly to develop 5G. And as I told you, we think that the future of mobile operators, and they not will be only just mobile operators, they will be digital operators. So that's why they need, I think, the C-band for 5G. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ilya?
Yeah, I think there are no doubts about the importance of the C-band for harmonization, like global harmonization, but we also do acknowledge that there are some big challenges in certain markets with allocating this spectrum due to the usage of other systems, etc. So we see that most probably it will be like a stepwise journey. The question is when there will be clear decisions how this spectrum going to be allocated. But other frequency bands, as I mentioned in my presentation, would be absolutely necessary to investigate and to leverage from the very beginning in order not to have a huge gap in time for 5G deployments in this particular market.
Thank you very much, Ilya. Okay, the next question is, do the panelists think that any spectrum in the C-band should be reserved for private networks? Anyone interested in answering this one?
May I answer?
Yeah, please, Meta, go. And then we can...
Thank you. Actually, with this dedicated spectrum for verticals, the RSPG, European body for radio spectrum policy group, published third opinion where they are talking about spectrum for verticals, and there they distinguish between three types of verticals. One type is are verticals operating in the mobile spectrum in mobile operator networks as dedicated slices. Then the other type is are verticals for who need regional coverage or local, and then are pan European or pan country pan-regional services such as intelligent transport systems and so on. They definitely need dedicated spectrum to be harmonized within a broader region. So for this regional and local, for regional, you would probably need some dedicated spectrum in some part of bands which are not so, which are not primary or top top 5G bands or are kind of leftovers for mobile operators. I mean, some countries decided differently. For example, Germany, because they have really strong industry. But in general, for example, we prefer the UK model, where they decide to put these regional verticals in the band 3.8 to 4.2 on shared basis, but protecting the incumbent services. Yeah, I mean, so it depends. Probably it's better to have the best spectrum for mobile operators and to leave the leftovers for verticals. Thank you.
Thank you. Has, you wanted to add something to that?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to contribute? Or should we move to the next question? Ilya, maybe you want to say something, or you're on mute as well?
No, thank you. I'm just, agree with what has been said.
Let's move on then. Are there already example of equipment for the 6 GHz range? Anyone?
Maybe I can comment. Maybe I can start. I think the first step is really to define the requirements to this frequency band and to start preparing for WRC conference, which will take place in 2023. And knowing all the potential requirements by that time will open the door for real commercial equipment. There is no any pragmatic sense to talk about the commercial equipment today. It will be more like trial pieces or minimum viable products or something like that. So probably it will be again several steps before we can introduce the real commercial one for mobile radio access networks.
Thank you very much, Ilya. Anyone else?
If I can comment here, not on the availability of equipment, but on the interest in the 6 GHz range. I think it's really important for people to understand that so the WRC 23 is going to discuss so many bands under agenda item 1.2 and other agenda items, and 3.5 GHz range is there, 6 GHz range is there. For us at the GSMA, we asked our members. We wanted to know from them what were their interests, their priorities for the new cycle, the new agenda item. And what we received in response was that they see the 6 GHz range as the highest priority for the upcoming cycle in all regions, not just in region 1. And the reason for that is because it's looking into the future. The 3.5 GHz, we're catching up with 2007, with 2015. It's already a reality in many parts of the world. Other parts of the world are catching up with the others. 6 GHz, look into the future. And that was the response we got from our members, global members. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciana.
If I just may make a comment, I mean, it's with respect to the 6 GHz band. I mean, as you know, this is also a satellite band where it is the uplink band for the C band. So obviously, it's the interference prospects are somewhat less than in the downlink, but nonetheless, it is an issue that we have to deal with. But at the same time, I urge regulators to look at the underlying economics, of services, of the mobile services, because when you look at, again, you look at the GSMA reports, the mobile economy reports, and you look at the reasons, the indicators about coverage and who's not getting service and the number of connected devices, you'll see that the problem is not the spectrum. It's often affordability. It's often other economic issues. So the answer to bridging the digital divide or for digital inclusion is not simply to add more and more spectrum, because in fact, in many ways, this will exacerbate the digital divide, because the mobile operators are going to be focused on the cities, on the lucrative markets where they make money, but they do not cover the areas that are in the rural areas. And then so it go back again to the fundamental issue. It's not just an issue of giving more spectrum and adding more spectrum that will solve the connectivity problem. There are other issues. The other point that you want to look at is that the amount of offloading that happens to Wi-Fi is tremendous. Often when we use our devices, you rely on the mobile network for, whenever you are out of the house or outside of a building. But the offloading that happens to Wi-Fi is quite significant, and then everybody acknowledges that. So again, it goes back to the issue of okay, how much spectrum do you want to allocate to the mobile industry? The other thing is that some mobile operators are looking at spectrum sharing because it's getting quite expensive to deploy mobile networks on dedicated basis. This is such an antiquated model that every mobile operator duplicates the infrastructure, duplicates the fiber, duplicates the towers, and then they don't share. And then you have a situation where the spectrum is used extremely inefficiently because everybody has their own separate network. Some mobile operators are going to say, wait a minute, we can perhaps share the spectrum and then run our networks virtually. And some of the major operators are going that way. But it's these things that we have to look at, and just not to get too exuberant with the demands of more and more and more and more spectrum. It never ends. I mean, at the same time, sorry to go on and on, the millimeter waveband, has been a major thing. Oh, we want the millimeter waveband. Okay, well, are you telling me you're going to deploy in millimeter wave and in C-band and in 6 gigahertz and in low-end spectrum? Do they really have the financial resources to deploy on all these fronts simultaneously? Or is it a case of like all you can eat buffet where you just give me? It's a never-ending story. I mean, it's again, we work with the mobile industry, we enable them in many ways, but there has to be a balanced and realistic approach of how spectrum is allocated.
Thank you, Gaz. And I think finally, Luciana wants to respond to that.
I would like to add a little bit, dear moderator. May I?
Yes, please. After that, I can give the word. Yep. Please go, and we can continue with Luciana after that.
So may I start?
Yes, please do.
Okay. First of all, it was a very interesting question, especially if we consider Huawei biggest vendor. We should ask them when gonna be equipment for 6 gigahertz, and it's just. For me, it was very interesting, this question, and I totally agree with my colleagues and especially with Luciana that I think that after under VRC 23, it will be a big push for the fast implementation of IMT systems. Till that time, I think this question is not so, let's say, important, because the vendor should know exactly how globally will be supported this band. And I really like it. Comments also, Hazem. Am I telling the right? Thank you very much for comments. So I think this question will be after VRC 23. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bakhtiar. And Luciana, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. I think those comments by Zoe were very interesting. I would particularly like to address the ones aimed at the mobile industry. First of all, we publish our mobile economy report every year with the contribution that the mobile industry has to society. We understand that a number of different technologies, a number of different services contribute to the society differently. The mobile service has undoubtedly contributed to the society. I presented yesterday links to about 4.1 to 4.9 GDP. Socioeconomic benefits to society, and this is what we contribute. Other people contribute differently. The amount of spectrum that we ask, it just reflects the amount of phone usage we all have. How much more do you use your phone compared to how much you used your phone 10 years ago? Everyone want to use more. Everyone want to use more data. Internet of Things want to use more, and this is merely a reflection. In 2007. People were not ready to see that the C-band was going to be really important for mobile. In 2015, more people were ready. Not everyone was ready. Technology has just went aside, evolved, and proved to everyone that regardless if you have an identification or you don't have an identification, everyone is going for it. In all regions of the world, this is happening. It is a fact. We play with the rules in ITU, we do the studies, we talk to all the countries, but it is just the fact that the technology is evolving. I always find interesting when the satellite industry talks about the amount of spectrum we ask for. Maybe our mistake was that back in 92, in WARC 92, we didn't ask for 30 gigahertz of spectrum as the satellite industry has. We had to, we asked for 120. And then every time we come for a bit more. Maybe if we had for 30 gigahertz back then, we didn't have to come every conference asking for more. We come every conference asking for more because everyone uses their mobile phones more and more. And just to finalize, and I apologize, I'm just trying to address the points made by my friend Hazem. If you look at what the mobile industry has contributed, at all the studies that the mobile industry have put forward, we try to fill a gap that was created by services that came before us. There was a digital gap that the satellite industry has left. They started when? 20 years, 15 years, 20, 30 years before us. And we have a space to occupy. We all complement each other. We serve some areas, other industries serve other areas, and the Wi-Fi industry cover another area, and we all complement each other. And we believe that it's complementing each other that the society benefits the most. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luciana. I think we have literally 60 seconds, so it will be very good if you try to answer that last question. And I appreciate if one of you tries to answer it in 30 seconds. I know it will be difficult, but what will be the impact on 5G development in Russia if 3.5 gigahertz is not ever released? Anyone want to take this last question or try to answer it very quickly?
I can. I just think that there's going to be a delay. That's my short answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Hazem, please.
Yeah, well, I have to comment on Luciana's comment that that the satellite industry left a gap. I mean, this is completely unfounded. I mean, this is comparing apples and oranges. The satellite industry was not meant to be a mobile industry for consumers. It's a different industry, but nonetheless, when you look at the contribution of the satellite industry, what we have done. The media distribution that has happened, the reliance on satellites for communications. Now we are enabling communications on the plane, something that our friends in the mobile industry cannot provide. So again, but there's this symbiotic relationship, and we're not trying now to point fingers at each other. What we are trying to say, there has to be a balance, in terms of spectrum allocations. There is recognition that, of course, we all use mobile phones and we all rely on them. They're very important, but the point is that there has to be a balance in how spectrum is allocated to ensure that all these systems can coexist and can continue now in the future. We have a role to play, and if our spectrum is constantly being eroded, then we will not be able to provide these services. If you're willing not to have the security of being on a plane and not fearing that it will crash because there's no traffic controller data being shared by satellites, maybe that's the way we want to go. But there has to be a balanced approach.
Thank you very much, Has, and thank you very much, Luciana. That was a great panel, and thank you all, the audience, for the interesting questions. I think it was a very interesting discussion. I think now I'll come back to Dan. Thank you again, all the panelists. That was a very interesting session. Hello, Dan, and over to you again.
Thank you, Kirill, and thank you to you as well for an excellently moderated panel. And I think I'd again echo your words of thanks to all the panelists. So thank you, everyone. Some really interesting discussions, really interesting presentations. So yeah, really enjoyed that. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So we need to move straight on because our next session is just about to start. So we're going to move straight on to our final session of the day, Next session is going to be looking at tackling the digital divide. So looking at some of the different spectrum bands and the different technology options that are available to help tackle the digital divide in the region. So that's going to be starting here on the main stage in just a minute or so. Literally about 1 minute's time, we're going to get started with that. Sergei Pashtuk from NIR in Russia is ready and waiting to moderate that session. So please don't go anywhere. Wait where you are, and we'll be back here with that session very shortly. And once again, before we go, a big thank you to all of our speakers and panelists, and to all of you out there for your questions in that last session. So as I said, don't go anywhere, and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.